Welcome to the Closing Call Podcast with me. I'm Jimmy Henderson, your host. I appreciate you joining us. This is the second overall episode that we've done, and we're going to tackle a very popular issue today, which is what to expect when you're expecting to buy a house. So there are lots of questions that our buyers have for this market when buying a house, whether you're a first-time home buyer and have never experienced this before, or let's be honest, we've bought several years ago, but that is not the same market that we're in right now. So we've asked you to send in your questions, and we are going to tackle the top 10 questions from our buyers today. So if you're thinking about buying a house, an investment property, and maybe you've got some questions, I would venture that your question will probably be answered in the next few minutes. So let's go ahead and get started today, and let's see if we can get those questions answered for our buyers. So question number one that's on the table is, how much money do I need to buy a house? I think I get that question probably more than any other question out there. So let me cover a few facets of that. We're going to deal with things like your down payment and then the extra money that you'll need in addition to your down payment, like closing costs. So the biggest factor in determining how much money you're going to need is really going to be the lending program that your lender puts you with. A lot of our buyers are going to qualify for conventional financing or FHA financing. There are some other lending programs out there that will kind of fall in between the cracks. But for the most part, if you are qualified for a conventional loan, normally the minimum required down payment is 5%. Now, there are some other programs out there that can get to 3%. I've heard of some that'll even go to 0%, but I would say 85% of my buyers that qualify for a conventional loan are putting down 5%. So if you are looking at a $300,000 home, your down payment at 5% is $15,000. But in addition to your down payment, you're going to need to set aside some money for your closing costs. Now, closing costs are going to be anything from what the title company is going to charge you for what they do, right? Their portion of the paperwork. You're going to have to pay for an inspector. You may have to pay for a survey, title policy, those types of things. And of course, what the title company charges to do what they do. There are real estate attorneys involved. There's recording of the documents with the county where your home is going to be. So they have their portion as well. On average, you can estimate that you're going to need between $6,000 and $8,000 for closing cost money. Now, when I tell you these are the dollar amounts that you are going to need when you're looking to buy a house, it doesn't necessarily mean that money has to come out of your pocket. We can get creative. There are some ways to get sometimes we can get some seller credits or seller concessions where the seller will kick in some of that money. Sometimes the lender has some special programs where they can help out with a little bit, but someone has to pay that dollar amount on your behalf. So if you do a conventional 5%, $300,000 purchase, we'll stick with that purchase price for easy numbers. Then you're looking at a $15,000 down payment. If we do FHA financing, which is what most of our first-time home buyers are doing now, because to be honest, it usually requires a lower credit score to be qualified, and it has a smaller down payment with it. It is a little more restricted loan, and so when you go to actually purchase your home, you'll find that an FHA loan is not going to allow you to buy some homes that, say, a conventional loan would. There are restrictions there, but strictly talking about numbers, an FHA loan is going to require 3.5% down. So on a $300,000 house, then that is $10,500. So much better than the 5% that's required on the conventional loan. But again, it's a more restricted product. And so usually most lenders will tell you that a conventional loan is going to be a little better product for you. So $10,500, your closing costs essentially are going to be about the same thing. That doesn't normally vary based on your lending product. So if you're looking to buy a $300,000 house and you say, Jimmy, what is the minimum amount of money that I need to come to the table with for a conventional loan on a $300,000 purchase, you're looking at about $17,000 to $18,000. And then on, about $22,000 to $23,000, and then on an FHA loan product, you're going to be looking at about $17,000 to $18,000. Obviously, the more money you put down, the smaller your monthly payment, the more options you're going to have. But in addition to your down payment, there are some other costs, closing costs that you'll need to pay before we get to the closing table. Let me tackle a few of those for you. Obviously, your earnest deposit, which normally is 1% of the purchase price, that money is paid as soon as you go under contract on a house. That money goes to the title company. So again, $300,000 house, you're looking at about $3,000. Again, your money, but it goes in the form of a deposit to the title company. So there's $3,000 there. In addition to your closing cost money, there is an expense that you're probably going to need to pay, which is the inspection fee. So you buy a house, you're going to get an inspection done from a licensed inspector, depending on the size of the house, whether you have a pool or a septic system, whether you want to get a termite inspection done. There are lots of variables there. That inspection is going to run anywhere from $300 up to $500 and $600. That's not included in your closing cost money. It is an extra expense, so you want to make sure that you've got that set aside as well. Your option fee, whenever you go under contract on a house, normally you're going to pay a couple $100s for 5, 7, 10 days of an option period, which essentially gives you the right to change your mind for any reason whatsoever. This is the time that most buyers will do the home inspection. They may have the family come and check out the house. They're praying about it, that type of thing. You get to walk away from the contract for any reason whatsoever, as long as you pay that option fee, normally $150 to $250. So that'll give you an idea as to how much money you're gonna need to set aside. But again, don't let the fact that you don't have all of that money sitting there hold you back. If you've got some of it, give us a call. We can help out. Again, there are great programs that are out there. There are seller concessions. With the market in the condition that it's in right now, where houses are sitting for a little longer, sellers are more apt to help out with some of those closing costs. A lot of times we can get it done for you. So the more you've got setting aside, the better, but don't let the fact that you don't have all of it sitting there right now hold you back. So number 2, what does my credit score need to be? That's a great question as well. There are fantastic lenders that are out there that have programs all over the place. Usually, I know that lenders will tell you we can get it done for $560 or $580, and those programs do exist, but they're very difficult to get qualified for because there are a lot of other circumstances that have to line up just right to make it work. But normally a 620 credit score will get you in the door. So if you come to the table with a 620 credit score, you're normally going to qualify for an FHA loan. Of course, there are tiers. So if you get to a 650 level, a lot of times you'll qualify for down payment assistance programs if your lender does those. And then usually around the 670, 680 mark is when you're going to switch from FHA to conventional. That's a better place to be. Again, that product allows you to buy more different types of homes. Okay, so that's where your credit score needs to be. But let me discuss something with you. When I tell you that your credit score needs to be a 620, I mean when they pull the credit report at the lender's office. So when they're checking the 3 major credit reports, the 620 credit score needs to come from there. And you say, but Jimmy, I've got Credit Karma. They tell me exactly what my credit score is. They lie. All right, I don't know how else to say that. Listen, they pull their credit scores and they work up those numbers differently. And, at the end of the day, they're selling you products. And so they're going to tell you one thing. And a lot of those third-party apps are the same way, not just that one. I think that's the most popular. But I have seen where this app will tell you that the credit score is, a 660, and then a lender checks it and it's barely a 600. It really does vary that much. So some of the other apps that are paid are going to be a little more accurate. I know that you can go directly to the credit bureaus and get a little better number there. But at the end of the day, your best option is to go to that lender and say, give me my credit score. What do I need to do? How can we move forward in a positive direction to be able to get qualified for the home? So those are the numbers where they need to be, but again, don't trust those third-party apps. Really get with a good qualified mortgage lender that can walk you through that process. All right, so number 3, what if I'm self-employed, right? As someone who's self-employed, that is a very double-edged sword because we love the tax benefits of being self-employed, and I'm sure you do as well. There are deductions out there that you just cannot take as an employee. If you're self-employed, right, we are deducting for gas and, dry cleaning and what. I had a conversation with my kid and they gave me a great idea of marketing, so I'm gonna deduct their allowance until they're 18, right? We've got great options out there because we don't wanna pay taxes. Nobody does. So you've got this great wizard of a CPA, and at the end of the year, you turn in your income and all your deductions, and they're like, great, you don't owe anything in taxes. I only showed that you made $8,000 this year, and you are singing the praises of your CPA. But now you wanna buy a house, and that is a problem. At the end of the day, your lender has restrictions on what money they can count for income and what money they can't. And if you're self-employed, here's what that looks like. You have to come to the table with 24 months of tax returns as a self-employed individual. And that could mean that you're an independent contractor. It could be a full-blown business owner, whether it's an LLC or an S-Corp, whatever your setup. If you are not a standard employee that receives a paycheck with taxes taken out and a W-2 at the end of the year, you're considered self-employed. So 24 months of taxes, and they're gonna take your total usable income, which means if you're only showing $10,000 in income because your CPA wrote everything off, and you do that 2 years in a row, you're gonna have 10,000 and 10,000, that's a total of $20,000 that you made over the last 24 months. They're gonna take that total, they're gonna divide it by 24, essentially saying, what was your average monthly income for the last 2 years? And they're gonna say, you qualify for food stamps, right? Because you don't make any money, and you're like, look at my car and let me show you my bank statements. And I've got really cool shoes. I obviously make a lot of money, and I'm sure you do. But the lender can't use that income. So be very careful when you're looking to buy a house, what money you're actually reporting on your taxes as income, because that's all the lender can use. They can't take your deposits into your bank account into consideration when figuring out your income. So you say, well, Jimmy, I've only been in business for 18 months. Well, if in 18 months, you probably would have filed 2 years tax returns. A lender can normally use that, but understand they're not gonna take 18 months worth of income and divide it by 18 months to get an accurate reflection of what your monthly income is. They're gonna take that total amount, and even though it's only 18 months, they're still going to divide it by 24. And so that monthly is gonna get chopped down a little bit. So just understand that. Your best position is to have 2 solid years of profitable tax returns when you're applying for a loan for a new home. That's how it works. And if you say, well, I'm brand new, I just started my business, and I'm making good money and I'm ready to buy a house, with traditional financing, there aren't a lot of options for you out there right now. Now, again, there are some other lenders out there that have very high interest rate loans, large down payment loans, and they'll finance some things for you. There is a possibility you could get into those and then refinance later, but traditionally speaking, you need 2 years of provable, profitable income from a business on your tax returns in order to be able to qualify for a home loan. So number 4, is now a good time to buy? I'm gonna be very, very blunt with you, because that's a general question. I can give you a general answer, and that answer is yes. And it doesn't matter when that question is being posed. So let me explain why. If you take any 10-year period in history, and you say, we're gonna start, for example, on June 1st of 1990, and we're gonna look at June 1st of 2000, right? Or any 10-year sliding scale. Real estate has always gone up. There's never been a time in history that from one point in time to 10 years later in time, the overall values have gone down. And being here in Texas, we are insulated from some of the crazy highs and lows that some parts of the United States experience. For example, East Coast and West Coast, those rates or those values fluctuate all the time. Texas doesn't. We are blessed to stay very consistent and usually in a pretty solid uptick. So depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to purchase your primary residence, now is always a good time to buy, especially if you're looking to stay in for 3 or 4 or 5 years. Because even though right now, for example, interest rates are higher than they were a year and a half ago, I want you to ask yourself a question. What is the interest rate on rent? It's 100%. It's 100%. Every dollar that you spend in rent is gone. There's no return on that. You're not building equity, and you've essentially given that money away. Now, if you're blessed to be with mom and dad in the back room and they're not charging you anything, take advantage of that as long as possible. But you want to buy a house, whether it's an investment property or your primary residence, because usually over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period, the value on that property is going to always go up. And real estate is not like the stock market or bonds, or let's be honest, your 401k, which is very volatile and it's based on the market. Because if you drop value in, for example, a stock and it drops down to zero, that stock has disappeared. It doesn't just sit there at 0 or -5 until that business starts to do better and then it picks back up again. When that stock drops to 0, it's gone. You have lost your investment. But in real estate, if you bought a house today for $300,000 and then in a year the market dips and it's only worth $270, well, you still have a home. And on paper it's only worth $270. Great. Take advantage of the drop in your tax value and get a cheaper tax rate. Wait a couple of years until that value picks back up again if you want to sell, and then you're going to be in good shape. So now is always a good time to buy. Number 5. Do I need to sell my house first? I've had a couple of buyers ask me recently what that process looks like. They said, well, I've got a house now. When do I start looking for a house? Am I gonna be homeless for a while? Am I gonna have to load everything up in a U-Haul and like drive to the title company? What does that look like? Usually we can work it out where you can sell your house and purchase the new house and close on the very same day. For example, I had a house that we closed a couple of weeks ago. We knew the market was a little bit softer, so we gave it some extra time when we put their house on the market. I believe we negotiated a 6-week closing on their purchase. So we went out, we found the house that they liked. I already had photos done of their home, so it was ready to hit the market. We went out shopping, found the home that they liked, got the offer accepted on what's called a contingency offer. In other words, the purchase of the new home is contingent on the sale of their existing home. So the seller agreed to that. We went under contract, immediately put their house on the market, and it worked out fantastic for us because we had a buyer on their house that, I don't know what happened. They flaked out and went away, and we had to put the house back on the market. Took a few days. We went under contract, and I'll tell you, we got right down to the wire where we closed both of them same day. And here's what it looked like. The client who was selling their home had negotiated 12 days. And when I say they negotiated, that's me, because that's what I do. They negotiated 12 days on a lease back, meaning they'd closed on the home. It's no longer their house, but they leased it back from the new buyer for 12 days. And we were able to work that out where it didn't cost them any money at all. So they stayed in their old home even after they had gotten the money from selling it for 12 days. And then they were able to move into the new house. So because they had gotten that money, let's say on a Wednesday, we closed on the new house the very same day on Wednesday. So they had 12 days where they had access to both houses, and it allowed them to move everything from one house into the other without being rushed and without being stressed, and it worked out perfectly. Now, I can't promise you it always works out that way, but with me and with my team, I would say confidently 8.5 out of 10 times, that's exactly the way it works. So if you plan on selling your house first before you buy your new house, don't let that hold you up. We can work that out where we can have both of those line up for a double closing same day. We won't miss a beat. So number 6, what if I make an offer on a house and it's a bad house? That's a great question. I can tell you there have been times where walking through a house and I can see on the face of my clients that they're wondering, like, what am I buying, right? We see those TV shows with, Money Pit and this kind of stuff where you buy a house and the electrical is trashed and the plumbing is bad and there are monsters under the stairs and all that stuff. So let me explain this process to you. Let me help put your mind at ease when it comes to buying a bad house. So once we do a visual inspection together, we'll walk through a house and decide, yes, I like what I see. I feel pretty good about it. As long as everything is good, I'm willing to pay this amount. We make that offer and the seller accepts our offer. I mentioned earlier that there's an option period. Normally 5 to 10 days, that's negotiable. And during that option period, after we sign the contract, we will come in and you will hire an inspector, okay? An inspector works for you. They're licensed by the state of Texas. but they work for you. And they do an inspection. Now, this is not a pass-fail inspection. So they're not gonna come to you and say, oh, I'm so sorry the house didn't pass. Or they're gonna say, good job, your house is good to go. They're gonna say, this is everything I'm going to check. And when I'm done checking it, this is everything I found. So they will turn into you sometimes a 40 and 50 page report, full colors, bright red arrows, underlining, and they'll say things like, hey, I checked all of the plumbing as best I could. You know, they will stop up all of the bathtubs and the sinks and let that water fill up quite a bit and then pull those plugs and see how quickly it goes down. They will turn on your oven and see how hot that thing gets. They will run a cycle in the dishwasher. They're gonna get in the attic and see how much insulation is in there. If possible, they're gonna get on your roof and check that kind of stuff out. They will check levels for your foundation. They will look for telltale signs that maybe something else is going on. So don't worry, especially when buying an older house, that you might be buying something blind, because I just don't know, and what if I get in here and the house falls apart? If you get a good inspector, and usually a good realtor can recommend a couple of different inspectors for you, ones with whom they've worked and have a good experience. And they're gonna go in and they're gonna put a lot of those worries and concerns to bed. And you're gonna get together and go over that inspection report so you've got a great understanding of exactly what it is you're buying before it's too late. And so let's say we do go through a house and it's trash. I mean, that thing is falling apart, about to fall on top of your head. And you decide, I don't want this house after all. As long as we're still in that option period, leave it up to me. I will get us out of that contract, no problem at all. You'll get your earnest deposit back. Now, you are gonna be out the option money, which again is normally $150 to $200. That money goes away because that's the money that you paid the seller for the right and the privilege to check everything out. And of course, the inspector doesn't give you back the money that you paid for the inspection because, let's be honest, he did his job. So it was certainly worth the $350 that you paid to save you the nightmare of buying a bad house. So that's great news whenever you're looking to buy a house. We do have ways to check it out before you get too far in the contract and can't get out. Number 7, who pays closing costs? A lot of times, buyers or sellers will come and they say, well, I'm not gonna pay their closing costs. I'm not gonna pay for closing. Well, closing is a broad term that really means a lot of different things, and it means different things to different people. So there are buyers' closing costs and there are sellers' closing costs. So as a buyer, here's what you're usually looking at. I mentioned this a little bit before on question number 1. So your closing costs are going to be your earnest deposit, which is really not a closing cost, but as you're thinking about how much money you're gonna need to set aside, this goes into that. So you take your, let's say $3,000 deposit, that's gonna need to go to the title company within 48 hours from the time that we go under contract. You're gonna have to pay for the option money, a couple $100. You're gonna have to pay for the inspection fee, $300 or $400, and you're gonna have to pay for the appraisal. Now the bank that's doing the lending for you is gonna send out an appraiser, and they're gonna go and check and make sure that house is actually valued at the contract price so that the bank knows that they're not over lending or you're not over purchasing on a particular property. So that appraisal is normally gonna run around $600. Now, if you have extenuating circumstances, if you have lots of land, 10, 15 acres, then that appraisal could go up. But for a standard house in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, usually inside the city limits, you're looking at about $600, okay? Those are all your costs. In addition to that, the lender is going to charge what the lender charges because they did the loan for you. You know, they did the credit check and they did the underwriting and they did the processing and they coordinated with the title company. They coordinated with the insurance company and they got all the docs prepped and there's lawyers and stuff there as well. So they have to get paid also. That's your closing costs. And then when you get to the title level, there are usually title fees that are going to be pretty much split down the middle. Those are going to be like your recording fee, what the title company charges to do their job, their closing fees, that type of thing. You're going to pay usually half and the seller will pay half. And then there is what's called the title policy, okay? The lender's title policy. This is an insurance policy on the title itself, and that's negotiable. And it's based off the price of the house. So for example, if you've got a $300,000 house, you're gonna probably look to pay about $1,700 or $1,800 on that title policy. It's part of the title fees. Usually in this market, the seller is paying that. Now, a year ago, when when buyers were just getting anything, when sellers were getting anything that they wanted at that point, then the buyers were actually paying for that. The buyers were saying, hey, if you'll accept my offer over their offer, I will pay that title policy. It's kind of switched back right now. And so that's still a bargaining chip. If you're trying to beat out another offer on a house, you can offer to pay that title policy, but normally the seller is gonna pay that. So as far as who pays closing, in a normal situation, unless something is negotiated differently, you're going to pay your closing costs and the seller is going to pay their closing costs. That's how that works. All right, number 8. Can we go looking now and then get pre-approved later? Buyers will call and they're so excited, or they just saw a house online, or they've been on the website and they're like, I love this house, or it's right down the street from my house. It's got a sign in the yard, take me to see this house. Well, the first question we have to ask as realtors, if you value your time, is have you already been pre-approved or pre-qualified with a good mortgage lender? The reason that we ask that is for our protection as well as yours. The last thing that I want to do is take you out to fall in love with a house. I mean, you've already seen your grandchildren playing in the living room, right? You've got your dog playing in the backyard, and you've already ordered the new grill from Amazon, right? This is your house. And then you talk to the lender and the lender says, I'm sorry, the numbers just don't work. Maybe you've got a collection on your credit that you didn't know about. Or man, the interest rates were not what you were thinking. Or mom and dad were gonna give you some down payment money and now they can't. Whatever the reason is, I don't want you to fall in love with a house only to be disappointed after the fact because the lender can't make it happen. Or let's be honest, what if you say, hey, look, I really think this is where I need to be, and so these are the houses I'm looking at, only to find out later that that was way under where you were comfortable. You could have actually gone for a lot more house, and now you're already under contract on something less, or vice versa, right? So it's possible to show you a house without getting pre-qualified, but I certainly would not recommend it. When I go to get fitted for a new suit or for a jacket, first thing I'm gonna do is say, hey, I need you to take my measurements, because I don't wanna be out shopping for, a 40 short when I had a little too many tacos and they say, well, you're at a 44 short, big boy, and now I've wasted all that time, right? So you wanna make sure you do your legwork first before you get out there and have your heart broken. So we can definitely go without getting pre-approved, but it's a bad idea. Number 8. Can we go, number 9. Can I use any lender I want? The answer is unequivocally yes. You have the right to use any lender you'd like. You have the right to go to the big bank where you have your deposit accounts. You can certainly do that. You have the right to go to the people who only have an app on their phone, but they do great marketing when you're binging Netflix, right? But here's my recommendation. Get with your realtor and ask them who they recommend. The reason that I say that that's a good idea is, for example, personally, I've worked with my preferred lender over and over and over and over again, and I trust them because I've seen nightmare situations get right down to the closing table only for some XYZ lender to drop the ball and vanish. We had one a couple of weeks ago where the buyer had just started a part-time job in addition to her full-time job and had taken that information to the lender that swore